All right, Nico, I want to start today with hearing the wonderful voice that you displayed here in the lead up to this. Can you sing for Jake one more time?
Yeah, yeah,
And this is Jake's feeling being 18 years old, young, hungry journalist moving from the small town to the big street, to the big mean streets of London.
of London. Yeah,
What
yeah,
was
yes.
the song you had in
Yeah,
his
so
mind?
he was just walking down, the streets of his little village, and in his mind he was all singing like, "I'm just a small town boy," right? So just starting
Wow.
us up a little bit.
Wow. Wow. Setting the tone, Nico.
Yeah.
That's
Our viewer
absolutely
count has just
fantastic.
halved for some reason.
It can only go up from here, so all good.
Thank you for putting me once again on the hot seat.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
taking it. Yeah, I'm the German, so all good.
That's what you got to do, Nico. Like, when the chance comes to perform in
Yeah,
front of an
yeah,
audience, you got to
yeah.
go for it. Nico, amazing to have you here. Jake, nice to be with you here live and in person. We are here in the IGME Next, or rather next Oteo studio. Here, I still got to get used to my own rebrand here. But fantastic, guys. We want to first and foremost break down Sigma a little bit today. Jake, you just landed here in Malta just now, so you haven't been to the conference so far. But obviously, you and me, Nico, we've been spending a couple of days there. So just to kick things up, Sigma, lots of people, any person I've spoken to in the last 2 days has an opinion, which is quite interesting because it's not normally what you get at conferences is people wanting to talk about the conference itself. But what were your impressions of Sigma this year?
So first of all, shout out to all the booth builders because the booths were quite nice
Yep.
looking, etc. So it was kind of like booth which we are used to see at ICE, right? The big booths, 20-second bet with the big LEDs, whatever. It was nice, of course. Hosting an event for 25,000 people at a small country like Malta seems to be challenging, especially finding a place which can cater all the people, making sure people actually arrive at the venue as well, which caused some traffic jams.
Yep.
And funny enough, like at every football stadium as well, at a certain time everybody wants to be there, and at another certain time everybody wants to leave. So it's not like you have a constant coming in and coming out. It's just you have peak times,
Yep.
and there you could literally just see that there might be some limits due to the traffic situation all over Malta, which you could see. But I don't want to get into much details as of now. But what had your experience been?
Yeah, yeah. For me, it was really interesting leading up to this, mostly from an organizer perspective, the fact that they were going to turn a shipyard that is built as a shipyard into a conference venue to be used for the first time as a conference, and not only a conference, but like a massive conference of that many people, as you just mentioned. There's always going to be a lot of unknowns as you go into something like this, and I was just really curious to see how this was going to happen, if it was going to happen, because it's such a massive challenge. And I think, a lot of people had comments about uneven floors and toilets that were perhaps not working all the time, dusty outside. There's a lot of like teething issues and kind of some health and safety concerns here and there. But the fact that they were able to pull it off and actually organize this event, that in its own right is such a big success in comparison to these kind of teething issues and small problems that they had. That I'm pretty sure that when Eman goes to bed tonight, I think he will draw a huge sigh of relief more than anything that they actually were able to pull it off. Because again, there's so many unknowns that you don't know what's going to happen before you have that amount of people there. So I think considering the challenge that they had, it was for sure the best that they could do with what they had. And for next year, I have a feeling that many of these teething issues are going to be solved, right? But there are some problems that you can't solve, which is the traffic, of course, And I found that quite interesting. Yesterday, there was some of the local newspapers reporting that there's a gridlock in Malta, and essentially everything is Sigma's fault, and so on and so forth. You can't get anywhere, and it takes an hour to get from point A to point B. and yada yada yada. So I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think? Like from Sigma's perspective, is it good or bad PR that the island is being gridlocked and the traffic is there's a traffic jam and it's hard to move and people are angry at Sigma? What would you think? Like, starting with you, Nick, is it good or bad PR for Sigma, do you think?
So first of all, whenever a big event like this, and we should not forget, Malta has 600,000 inhabitants. So if there are 25,000 attendants at one event, it's nearly 5% of the overall population.
Right.
So that's the one thing. So whenever a big event like this happens at a town, people go nuts. It was the same like the Love Parade in Berlin. It was literally the same, if not even worse, when the Champions League final was in Munich, which they called the Finale daheim. It was, everybody was going nuts. And then we are speaking about a town like Munich having 1.4, 1.5 million inhabitants, having a well-established, public transportation, and everybody was still going crazy and going nuts. So first of all, when there's a lot of light, there's also a lot of darkness, and people literally want to see or want to read a little bit of the good, but way more of the bad and ugly. And this is something which we should always take into account, which doesn't change the facts that the streets in Malta, regardless of if there's any event, are tiny. So compared to my driving skills in Germany, I wouldn't cope with the small streets here in Malta, except the fact that you're, from my perspective, driving on the wrong side. But it is like it is. So what about your feeling, Jake?
Yeah, I think there's a saying, isn't there? There's no such thing as negative coverage. If you're in the headlines, then that's kind of where you want to be, especially if you've got sort of global aspirations like Sigma do. But I agree with Nico. It's never easy to put on an event of this size, whether it's a gaming show or if you've got 25,000 people turning up anywhere. We've seen music festivals collapse with fewer visitors than that. So yeah, there's always going to be kind of logistical teething issues. I think a good way of combating that maybe is good first impressions. And I saw a couple of very positive comments on LinkedIn about the fact there was actually a kind of Sigma greeting at the airport this year, at Malta Airport, for international visitors. So I think that's a nice thing to think about, so you don't sort of turn up and wonder what on earth is going on. You're kind of being taken care of straight away, I suppose. Yeah,
I would say, it's an interesting thing, because I was speaking to my head of marketing and he has a different opinion than me, but the traffic issue and the negative PR that came out of that, like the negative tone PR, I think genuinely it is the best possible PR they can possibly get, because the way that Emman is promoting the show is the mother of all conferences, right? And the fact that his conference broke down the national infrastructure, it's not just saying that it's the mother of all conferences. It speaks to the fact that his conference is so big that the infrastructure of the country broke down. Right? Like what better PR can you get than that? Like that sets the tone for the monster that this conference is, right? And it speaks into this narrative that is being created. So many people coming here, the hotel prices shoots up the roof. Like that to me is also good PR. It's like, again, it speaks to how big and serious the conference is. Infrastructure breaking down, that speaks to how big the conference has gotten. And it all feeds into this narrative that is being created. And Leva Nico Jansen of FAPA, he said it best, I think, to summarize this point. He said, a lot of different opinions on Sigma this year, a lot of like negative comments here and there. But at the end of the day, everyone is coming back next year, and that's a sign of a successful conference. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'd be interested to know kind of what the locals make of it as well, because you say everyone's aware of it now. Like you can't not be if you live in Malta, and there are obvious downsides in terms of traffic and congestion. But what about like the trade and the industry it brings to the island, for example? Like, is it something for hotels, restaurants, etc. to get excited about once a year?
Yeah, I mean, by and large, the locals would see it as something very positive here at Sigma. They all like everyone recognizes that Sigma is a massively important event for the local economy, and it's more that I think the local Maltese wants to. They get more. They don't get angry at Sigma per se. They get more angry that the infrastructure is not better. Like the politician needs to do a better job to sort out the infrastructure, because it's like they should not happen because of a conference. Let's say like we need to maintain and improve our infrastructure in order to handle these things. So yeah, from that perspective, I think the locals are happy with the opportunities that it brings, and a lot of local businesses, of course, are happy with the extra spend that is taking place during these days. But I think Phil Pearson, he commented here as well that this is summer as the week, and kind of lead into the next topic here today. Is he said, as someone with DraftKings stock, this is a good week. Almost as good a week as it is a bad week for even flooring and toilets. Always on point, Mr. Pearson, who, by the way, finished third place in the poker tournament the other day by high roller. So congratulations to Phil. And he was very adamant that he was trying his best to lose as quick as possible. And so maybe that is
that's the strategy. How did you get on? Do you guys compete?
Well, I played that tournament. I busted really early, and then he felt sorry for me, so he let me re-entry and play again, and then I busted one more time. So I was the only person who lost twice, Jake, in that tournament. Thank you very much for reminding me.
Sorry, you should have told me not to bring it up off air.
Yeah, no worries. But let's segue into DraftKings, which is I suppose the main topic of today. Jake, you talked about the fact that DraftKings has now overtaken FanDuel as the number one online operator in the United States in terms of GGR. DraftKings obviously massively proud of this and touted this in their latest call with investors. Can you talk a little bit more about this story? Why does it matter, and why do you think DraftKings have overtaken FanDuel finally?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously the US market is still looms large in the overall gaming industry. So any headlines over there are kind of headlines globally, and if you're the market leader in that market, it's a hell of a thing to stick on your CV, I think. I think it's massively notable, really, because, only a year ago, probably on this pod, we were hosting Weekly News and we were asking the question, is FanDuel's lead unassailable? Like, are they ever going to be beaten, basically? Because it looked like it was kind of them way out in front, and then a few challenger brands sort of scrapping around for the rest, and then it slowly became a duopoly with DraftKings. And last month it was Eilers and Krejcik Gaming that crowned DraftKings as the overall US market leader now, which is quite the transformation in quite a short period of time. And I think obviously we'll get onto some of the factors that are kind of driving that. But if we just look at their share, so DraftKings holds now a US online gambling, so that's sports betting and iGaming share of 31% for GGR, and that's according to Eilers and Krejcik Gaming. And I think our producer's got a little graphic for you where you can see the exact moment that DraftKings overtook FanDuel for the very first time. Unfortunately, we can't see that in the studio, but I mean, Pierre, what do you make of it? Because this was a huge topic of discussion for us, right throughout the last sort of 9 to 12 months, and now we have a new leader.
Yeah, I would just like to start by saying, on behalf of everyone here at iGaming Next, all the people who report and work here, a big apology to Jason Robbins for being a little bit mean at times, for not believing in the very confident Robbins who tweeted a year and a half ago that anyone who sold his DraftKings stock today, just to remind them that we are working as hard as we can to prove you that this was the worst mistake of your life. And Jason turned out to be very right about that. The stock is up a couple of 100% since that time. There's no doubt at this point that DraftKings are doing absolutely what they have communicated that they will do. Not only that, but they have actually been conservative in their forecasting, and they are consistently forecasting above what they have promised, and they are constantly improving their forecast. So I would just like to first of all hit myself a bit on the finger here, and Nico, if you want to put out your hand as well, here, shame on you.
I'm just going to blame it on Connor because he's not here, so he's not here to defend himself.
Shame on you, Jake. Shame on you, Nico. Shame on myself as well for doubting Mr. Robin and his excellent team, because DraftKings has gone from absolute strength to strength this year. The stock is up like 250% since the start of the year. They have just been steamrolling the entire market, and I think it's down to probably some quite simple facts, which is you mentioned this before as well, Jake, that they are kind of the only US born and bred organization within the industry today amongst the incumbents, and they are fully focused on executing the strategy to become the leader in the online gambling space. At the same time, FanDuel, obviously a monster, but owned by Flutter, and they are part of that massive corporate machine. Caesars, BetMGM obviously have their corporate kind of overlords, whereas DraftKings is kind of doing their thing. They are founder-led. Jason Robins founded the company. He's the CEO of the company. He has all the voting rights within the company. So there isn't really that red tape within that organization, I would think. Jason Robins has built an organization in a really, really smart way, where he has the operational freedom to take very big and bold decisions and execute a strategy to his own liking. And I think this is a huge advantage that DraftKings has as they move forward into this very unpredictable environment. This type of industry is not really conducive of a good industry for publicly traded companies that kind of need to stick to very particular and strict strategies in a predictable environment. But it's much more suitable for organizations like DraftKings, albeit they are publicly traded, but Jason Robins has all the voting rights in the organization. He doesn't really have to worry about defending his position in the company. He can only focus on executing and building a long-term value in this organization. I think we have started to see the result of this. And just a final point as well. I think there was an assumption 2 years ago that the team of FanDuel and the product of FanDuel was much better than DraftKings. They had a lot more experience, from the European side, and a lot more years of building excellent product. However, it seems to me that again, DraftKings are learning and they are improving as they go, and they are perhaps better at executing at this point than FanDuel. And I'm assuming that this is what we are seeing now, considering that DraftKings is stealing market share left, right, and center from FanDuel.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just to add to that, I think it's been kind of the perfect landscape for DraftKings, if you like. As you point out, Flutter, which owns FanDuel, has a million other markets to operate in, a million other brands to worry about. They even had a second US brand until recently with FoxBet, which was basically a distraction. Whereas DraftKings doesn't have any of that, doesn't have any international concerns really. And also, crucially, it has no sort of land-based casino operations that are a priority, for, which is what we've seen for a lot of their competitors. You think, MGM, the land-based is still obviously number one. We've seen kind of Wynn and Bally's have a punter online, and that's suffered. Whereas DraftKings has this clear focus where its only priority really is online sports betting and gaming. I think the other thing that's really contributed to that is the fact that we've not really seen any kind of state legislation moving over the last sort of 6 to 10 months. it's kind of leveled out slightly, and that means they haven't got to spend millions on marketing for new state launches or acquiring new customers or getting their brand out there or whatever. It's kind of a closed book now, so they know exactly what markets that they're going to be in. And then the third part of that, I think, is like I've said, we've seen other operators pull back. So basically, they can't afford it. They can't afford to do land-based and online. They're spending too much on marketing. They can't justify it to investors, whereas this is DraftKings' story. This is their bread and butter, and all those things, I think, have combined to make it a kind of perfect operating environment for them.
Yeah. And something else that came out now that I found exceptionally interesting as an investor myself in DraftKings is, where is this all going to go? So yeah, we are looking at profitability, full year profitability next year. But at the end of the day, investors want to know how profitable is the company going to get in order to understand better, where do you value the company right now? It's so difficult. This has always been the tricky thing with DraftKings. It's like, where do you put the valuation on this company? And they talked about the guidance, the EBITDA guidance for the next couple of years. Can you talk a little bit more there? Like what is DraftKings expecting in terms of EBITDA in the next 5 years?
Sure. So it was DraftKings Investor Day this week, which is always great because it basically is when executives come out and be very transparent about future plans for the company. And Jason Robins basically revealed a forecast of adjusted EBITDA of 1.4 billion in 2026, rising to 2.1 billion in 2028. But I think the most interesting thing from a shareholder's perspective, Pierre, was that those figures are based on just being operational in the states that they're live in today. So, sometimes investors think DraftKings' sort of future outlook is based heavily on whether we're going to see California regulate or Florida or additional US states. And Jason Robins has kind of come out and said, actually, we don't need any of that anymore. We can get to those really high targets with the share of the pie we've got now. And there was one figure that stood out to me. So DraftKings previously thought that 65% of the US population would require access to sports betting for the company to achieve EBITDA of 2.1 billion, as well as 30% of the population to have access to iGaming. Obviously, we're sort of nowhere near that now, certainly in terms of iGaming. I'm not sure what the exact figures are, but they've still guided to 2.1 billion in 2028. Yeah. So, yeah, super bullish presentation from Jason Robins.
Yeah. I mean, let's think about this for a moment, because if the assumption is correct from Jason Robins that with 30% market share by 2028, they would make $2.1 billion in EBITDA without any state launches, without any expansion whatsoever. Just basically how the landscape looks like today. They are reaching $2.1 billion EBITDA. That means, if they manage to show that growth, I don't know what the right PE ratio of a company that is growing that much is, but I would imagine that you'd price that at like a 30 times the PE, something like that. So that would mean that there is like so with a market cap of 17 billion today, that means that we'll have like a 3.5 times upside to what the share price is today. That's what they are saying essentially. So if that EBITDA comes true by 2028, the share price should be around 3.5 times higher than what it is today. So that is essentially the kind of underlying upside that Jason Robins is talking about here. However, that does not include, again, what you mentioned, Jake. What if they finally make an acquisition and expand internationally? The rumor mill is saying that 888 is a potential target, right? And Tain is quite low valuated at around like 7 or 8 billion. It's like 1/3 of DraftKings today. Could make sense eventually. They have obviously tried before and looked at that company. And what if more states open up? This is also not included in this forecasting. And what is also not included is the fact that today they enjoy like a 37% market share. And this 2.1 billion euro EBITDA calculation is based on a 30% market share. So even if they decrease in market share from 37% to 30%, they are still hitting this 2.1 billion. So there's so many ways that if the underlying calculation is correct and the assumption that 30% market share in 2028 will lead to 2.1 billion EBITDA, then there's so many other upsides that can increase the opportunities for DraftKings to reach even higher. And that's really surprising to me, because look at the biggest international gambling company today, Flutter. They have global dominance in many markets, active all over the world, and they are still only generating slightly more than 1 billion. Well, I'd say only slightly more than 1 billion pound in EBITDA, right? And so DraftKings is talking about generating almost twice of that, only with the states that they are live in at the moment. That speaks volumes of how huge this opportunity is, what they have just now, let alone how much they can expand as well in the future.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk about ESPN Bet in a minute, Nico, but just to touch on what you said, Pierre, obviously that is all things that could raise the bar even higher for DraftKings, but those are also the things that bring uncertainty, right? So that they could bring unseen headwinds with them. We've seen how expensive new state launches are. If one of the big guys suddenly decides to regulate, that's going to cost an absolute fortune. You mentioned M&A. DraftKings has been a little bit coy about having global aspirations, but I think that's definitely on the agenda for them, maybe an acquisition. We know they looked at 888. Again, though, that's a huge distraction, another big tech integration. Could they potentially take their eye off the ball if something like that was to occur? And then I mentioned ESPN, because the other big thing is increased competition. Like I said, it's been a perfect environment for them, where we've actually seen competitors pull back on spend. But if one of the big guys, ESPN Fanatics, decides to throw a bunch of money at this, it's going to make things a lot more complicated for DraftKings. And yeah, I go back to it, like this was the exact right time for DraftKings to do this Investor Day. Share price was $11, I think, per share in January, up to like $35 or something now.
Yep.
They just beat all the forecasts of their Q3 results. They've got a new product to unveil, so it's very much like everything's going our way, A lot can happen in a year. As like last year, we were saying, look at DraftKings, they're never going to catch FanDuel. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens on this pod this time next year. But Nico, what do you make of the potential for a kind of influx of competition? Because obviously this week saw ESPN Bet go live as well.
Yeah, so first of all, touching down on what you just said, with the perfect timing, first of all, they just sliced and diced it in a perfect way, as ESPN just launched on the 14th of November. They had their investor meeting on the 15th, so for sure we did not see any numbers flying in from ESPN Bet. And I'd just like to quote and once again shout out to him, Daniel Gretzer, why DraftKings and FanDuel have such quite unique position in the US market, because they have an underlying DFS up and running. So they are looking at, okay, we have a significant user basis already. It's just our game to convert this user basis into active punters, which they did quite well in Ontario. If I'm not mistaken, they converted 65, around 70% of their existing user bases to become active punters. And this is the game they are facing. And this is a, DFS game of FanDuel and DraftKings. As of now, they are literally, on going toe-to-toe within an eyesight. And when we were speaking about DraftKings and if they will recover, etc., I was still thinking that they are a target for Disney, being acquired, as their market cap was around 6.5 billion, way below their heights, which was around 35 billion. So it could have been a potential target, as very established brand, great and positive, overall side with the DFS. And as said, as of now, we're speaking about 31, 33 states where sports betting is allowed. Within the last 12 months, probably just 2 or 3 states have launched, with Ontario, with Maine, where we see the first numbers. And as said, and just to round this up a little bit, as of now, we will see competitors entering the markets like ESPN, like Fanatics, who also have a big and loyal user bases, and then we will see if the duopoly will shrink a little bit if we see someone going toe to toe with them, because as of now, and that's the quite unique situation of the overall US market. The affiliate game doesn't work in that market. We've seen it in New York when Caesars and BetMGM were coming up with this crazy deposit bonuses within the thousands. So they were literally burning a lot of money. But the loyal customers, first of all, took the bonus and then signed up with their FanDuel and DraftKings offerings as well. And I'm pretty sure that this game will change as soon as we see ESPN and Fanatics entering this game, because especially for Fanatics, we're speaking about a customer database which holds more than 100 million customers, and if they can convert these customers right, as said, gambling customers are quite loyal customers.
Yeah, it's I want to also just mention that we talk about like potential increased competition to DraftKings and FanDuel from the obvious newcomers, the Fanatics and the ESPN bets, and I would throw Bet365 in there as well. But I think where we should also be looking at is the increased competition from these alternative products that are entering the market as well. Sweepstakes have been flying under the radar for quite a few years, with the sweepstakes operator Chamba kind of owning most of the markets, and they kind of had a lot of proprietary knowledge in how to operate a sweepstakes casino. That proprietary knowledge is now unknown, not a secret anymore, and more sweepstakes operators are springing to life, and this is a massive vertical within the industry that is generating a lot of GGR that we would never know how big that vertical is. It's very hard to tell, other than that many of the sweepstakes operators are very affluent, basically operating completely outside of regulation, as long as they stay within the sweepstakes rules and so on, of course. But another vertical, of course, is the DFS products that are more like dipping their toes in a fine line between sports betting and DFS, and we are seeing some like legal kind of challenges springing to life here against the likes of Underdog and Better and so on, who are like dabbling a little bit there. I don't know if can you maybe talk a little bit more about those stories, perhaps, Jake? Like, what is it that is going on in the DFS landscape at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good point to make, I think, because DraftKings definitely does see those companies as competitors. You mentioned Underdog. There's also Prize Picks that are sort of becoming increasingly popular with sports consumers without necessarily being regulated as real money gambling. And it's funny you should mention that, because DraftKings has just unveiled a product called Progressive Parlays, which basically allows customers to kind of win on parlays or accumulators, even if not all of their bet selections come in. And a few people on Twitter were quick to point out that that's very similar to the types of products that are being offered by those challengers you mentioned, the Underdogs of this world. And Jason Robbins has been asked about this, and instead of naming companies, he's just brushed them all, tarnished them all with the same brush, and has said any clampdown on illegal gambling is good for us. And we've seen state regulators in quite a few significant states actually look to clamp down on kind of these pick'em DFS operators, and that seems to be a continuing trend. And I'm not sure whether there's, they're basically at loggerheads, these companies, like Jeremy Levine, I think it is, from Underdog, has been quite vocal about this on Twitter, and about the fact it's a bit of a witch hunt from the bigger sports betting operators. I also think you can flip that on its head, though. I think DraftKings potentially has fallen down in the past by trying to get stuck into verticals that aren't it shouldn't have. My favourite bit of commentary on this whole topic comes from Islas and Christchurch Gaming, and they touch on that. They say DraftKings' ability to reel in FanDuel using more than just brute force spending speaks to a company that is now stepping away from squishy narratives like NFTs and like media, and instead is harnessing the power of more focused, disciplined execution. And I think that's exactly what we've seen. So, yeah, I don't think DraftKings should be thinking about its competitors at this point. And should just be continuing as it has done.
I love the investment case. Like in hindsight is 2020, of course, but roll back the tape 2 years, like 2 very short years, and the investment case for DraftKings was like, no, you shouldn't look at the current valuation of DraftKings based on their opportunities in the sports betting and online gambling landscape. You should look at the opportunities outside of this landscape. For example, the NFT platform that they're investing in and other emerging technologies. So there was a point there at some point 2 years ago where the hope of DraftKings was not that they were going to be a online gambling company only, but that was going to be one of like 4 verticals, for example, with all with the same size. Like talk about a big change in just a couple of years in tone. No one talks about anything else now than online sports betting, online gambling side. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's paid dividends, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And rolling the tape just a little bit more into the past, I was attending the Web Summit in 2015. When the FanDuels and the DraftKings were heavily expected just to attending like our, exhibitions like the ICE, etc. And they always kind of made a very late appearance. So back in 2015, he was announcing. So Nigel Eccles, he was the CEO of FanDuel during that time. So he was one of the main speakers on the main floor at the Web Summit in Dublin, and he just announced, we just closed a funding round of, if I'm not mistaken, 400 million. And 2 weeks later, the state attorney of New York filed a file against and a lawsuit against him. Okay, you are actually gaming. It's not DFS. It's not kind of some funky bunch. You are gaming, and this is what they've always been afraid of, losing their status as a DFS. And then out of a sudden, first of all, as you don't hold a license, it's illegal operations. And as you already mentioned, when he just slapped each and everything down, they have been in the same seat and within the same shoes as well back in the days in 2015. So obviously history repeats itself. And as of now, they're in the leading position, but it will never get boring.
That's for sure. Do we know anything yet, Jake, by any chance, like the launch of Fanatics? And I think like one way to track success is the app downloads, for example. I remember looking at this like recently, and it didn't seem to me that they had eaten up that much of the total like app download kind of cake. I don't know if you know by heart kind of approximately where they are, or like if we have any indication of Fanatics so far.
Yeah, not off the top of my head. I think Islas will obviously have that data, but they've not launched in many states. Like they first went live with a retail sports book, and then their app came later, I think. But I don't think they're in more than 1 or 2 states. I might be mistaken, but that will be why. It's certainly not a kind of nationwide rollout by any means.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's interesting, I think, to me. I would love to now start comparing ESPN Bet with Fanatics in terms of app downloads, and obviously the lagging indicator will be the GGR, how that builds up over time and so on. But like the direct measure that we can see now is like, of course, the app downloads in the various states there. Yeah. It'd be interesting to look that up at some point. I think Eilers certainly tracked that for sure. It'd be good to look at. Let's follow up on that perhaps next week and see.
Because I might be wrong about that, because obviously they've bought the PointsBet US business, so have likely launched in the States wherever PointsBet was live. So I'll have to come back to you with the 16th
of August they launched 4 states.
4 states. Okay,
4 states they launched in total there. But what expectations do we have on ESPN Bet then specifically? Is there anything that comes to mind? Any thoughts on that front?
Well, I expect them to throw a lot of money at sports bettors this week. Just to go through a few of their sort of sign-up offers that they've launched with. So You can bet anything and get a $250 in bonus bets. And that's for as little as kind of a $1 bet. You can also get a $1,000 deposit match, which is available until the 31st of December. ESPN Bet, you asked about their aims. They're targeting a 20% share of the US sports betting market overall. Yeah. And they're aiming for kind of between 500 million and 1 billion in a long-term EBITDA for Penn's sort of online division, which obviously includes ESPN Bet. I don't know how long-term that is, we're talking, mind.
Yeah, but that's interesting. With so ESPN Bet are saying they are gunning for a 20%, and the EBITDA 500 million to 1 billion, whilst DraftKings are talking about a 30% market share with a $2.1 billion market. So either one of the calculations are not correct, let's say, or like calculated a bit differently, or DraftKings is saying that they're just going to become a lot more efficient, I suppose.
Yeah,
so it's interesting to analyze because companies are thinking differently on the total market opportunity here.
Yeah, just to go back to DraftKings, because I think there's one thing that we might be missing here, which is really significant, and that is their acquisition of Golden Nugget. Because for sports betting, FanDuel and DraftKings are really close, like neck and neck on both share and product and everything. I think iGaming is where DraftKings is building up a bit of a lead. Obviously, there's only, I think, 6 states with iGaming at the moment, but DraftKings' GGR share is 27%, whereas FanDuel's is 23%. And yeah, I think that's huge for them because ESPN Bet, like, that's obviously going to be sports betting primarily. In fact, they're actually launching iGaming under a different brand. They're launching under Penn's Hollywood Casino brand, so it's going to have no affiliation with ESPN at all.
That's a very good point. So when they talk about 500 to $1 million EBITDA and 20% market share, they talk about sports betting specifically.
For the market share, yeah. For the EBITDA, that's Penn Interactive, so that's both brands. That's ESPN Bet and Hollywood Casino. The other thing to keep in mind is that ESPN is by far the most popular sports media brand in the entire US, and I think they have 200 million monthly unique viewers across their channels. And
similar to Next.io.
Yeah, exactly.
We are not Americans.
But I think they're gonna, really hit those integrations hard. Like I think their Twitter account's already rebranded to ESPN Bet. We're going to see, dedicated betting shows on primetime sports broadcasts, all that kind of thing. That, to be fair, FanDuel does to a degree at the moment. But ESPN went live this week, Nico. 17 states, one more than was initially announced in August. But what it gets to me about this is just how expensive it is. I forgot how expensive the original deal was. So it's a 10-year agreement, which is worth $2 billion. Yeah. And Penn is basically paying ESPN $150 million annually for the next 10 years, and that's just to use its brand. Yeah. Like ESPN doesn't have to really do any of the heavy lifting in this regard, and that's in addition to $500 million of Penn shares as well. But crucially, there's this sort of 3-year cut-off point where if the market share doesn't reach those aims as forecast, both parties basically reserve the right to terminate the agreement, which would be a complete disaster for Penn. You think they've had 2 goes at it then. Exactly. They bought Barstool for 700, 800 million and sold it for $1. Yeah. And if that were to happen again, then that would be disastrous. Yeah,
absolutely. Any final thoughts here on your side, Nico? Before we go into the last topic.
Just because I was reminded there was a guy, US analyst, who actually published data about app downloads, and I just looked it up. So Bet365, which you mentioned, Pierre as well. So they had been. It's enough to make Bet365 the 4th most downloaded app according to AppTweak, and they came up overall in the US. It's 104 145 downloads just in October. So 145,000 downloads.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, 145,000 downloads. The pack was led by FanDuel, DraftKings, and BetMGM, and Fanatics came in sixth.
Sixth place, yeah.
Yeah, right. So the first month they were launching, they were sixth. So this still underlies like, okay, it's all about the product, and it seems like the product of DraftKings and FanDuel is still leading. So
yeah, and this is like kind of like now and ever, like how important is the brand versus the product, and how far can just the brand alone carry you in this industry. Now we will be seeing that from two different perspectives. Fanatics, established brand with brick and mortar presence, and ESPN Bet with a massive reach, and the established and trusted brand and so on. So it'll be interesting to follow as we go forward. Last topic of today, we'll touch on this briefly. New York, congratulations. First month of $2 billion in GGR, broke the all-time high. The state is clearly generating more and more revenue on a year-to-year basis. Jake, can you talk about this story?
Yeah, sure. New York is obviously a state everybody loves to look at, and I think it's significant because FanDuel is still the leader in this state. So despite losing that kind of national crown to DraftKings, FanDuel is still very much the standout leader in New York. So there's only 8 operators licensed in New York, and I think we've got a graphic, a pie chart to show you, which is kind of a GGR breakdown of those 8 operators, and you've got FanDuel on pretty much 50% at 83.1 million GGR for the month of October. DraftKings is next on about 36%, 59.3 million. Then you drop all the way down to Caesars at about 6%, and then BetMGM on 4%, and then the rest are kind of below 1%. So it's an interesting market, New York, because obviously there's only 8 licenses. It's unusual for a US state, and some have basically just had to pull out entirely. Like they've just decided it's too expensive. I know Bally's has kind of taken its app offline while it transitions onto a Canby sportsbook. But you've got like companies like Resorts World Bet, for example, which made $894,000 in GGR in October, and you just think,
Are you okay? You're okay, mate.
Yeah, but Nico, I know you keep quite a close eye on New York. What did you make of the kind of October figures and the bigger picture there?
Yeah, so it was quite interesting, especially if you just take a look. Okay, with an underlying handle of 2 billion, which is an upside of the last month of 17.6% compared to September. So the revenue, which actually stays at the operators, was 166.3 million. So with a handle of 2 billion, you just generate a revenue of 166.3, and with a taxation rate of 51%, the highest gainer of this revenue is the state of New York.
Yeah.
So while you're operating, while you make each and everything happening and make the customers happy, the state of New York is like, okay, so 51% of this is ours, and this just emphasizes how crazy the market actually is and why there are only 8 license holders, especially targeting the market. And it's also interesting that, according to the discussion we just had, that DraftKings surpassed FanDuel. This doesn't apply to the state of New York, as the overall handle was roughly 45% dealt by FanDuel, while roughly 33% was from DraftKings. So there you see it's a pretty interesting race of these two highly competitive companies. And if DraftKings might be leading in other states, it will be close just between the two of those. And I'm pretty sure, as this is just, we're seeing September, we're seeing October numbers. It will be interesting, the numbers where each and everybody from the sports betting world in the US is so, or luckily looking forward to. It's the NCAA championship as soon as it comes to college basketball, because this is where you will top each and everything which you've already seen within the last year when it comes to handles. So I'm pretty sure we did not see the end of this, and I'm thrilled to just see where this might take us.
Yeah, I think obviously we talked about ESPN and Fanatics as well, but like, let's consider New York is a locked market effectively. So DraftKings and FanDuel are already there, whereas those other guys, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to enter anytime soon. I know Joseph Adabo, the senator, he kind of spoke previously at our show about maybe expanding the market, but I don't think there's been any movement on that, and New York looks a lot more interested in its land-based casino than it does in sort of extending online sports betting licenses. So yeah, there's that to consider as well in that kind of competition.
I think what's most likely gonna happen from here is there's going to be a lobbying effort to lower the tax. I think, and that's also like a bit the buzz around the conference last year, is that the senator is being kind of pressured a little bit to consider a lower tax than the 51%. I think it's going to be quite obvious as we go forward that is quite unsustainable with the 51% tax rate long term. And I think this is what the operators are banking on as well, that they are probably quite happy, say the likes of DraftKings and others, that were able to like ring fence the market around these just few operators, make it really difficult, make it really dirty and expensive to operate in this market, and then later on lower the tax rates. And then you can reap the rewards back, of course, for navigating through this difficult landscape. I think this is kind of like a little bit the strategy that the operators are looking at. Look at the proposed legislation in California, for example. What was it, like $100 million barrier to entry, right? Proposed by the operators, not by any state legislator, by the operators. Proposed $100 million. That's the barrier to entry that they want to set in order to be able to kind of secure their oligopoly in that market, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want 100 operators competing against them. They only want this to be a market for them, So I think we'll see something similar in New York happening eventually as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And just to bring this sort of full circle, and in terms of the investment case as well, we spoke about DraftKings being the only US online pure play operator. But what we're going to see from Q1 next year is Flutter listing in the US for the very first time. It's chosen the New York Stock Exchange to list some of its a kind of dual listing of its shares as well as in London. So maybe US investors will be more attuned to the company now that it's sort of live on the New York stock market as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Any final points today, gentlemen?
Yeah, just an interesting fact, as soon as speaking about New York in particular, each and everybody also eyes on what's happening on the casino side, with the 3.5 billion Rock Nation investment on the casino, which might happen on Times Square. Las Vegas Sands, their kind of casino in Nassau is now in jeopardy. They are talking about 5 billion construction. So it will be interesting, as said, as soon as the overall gaming actually touches down in New York, in the city that obviously never sleeps, especially not during the iGaming Next times, and when we're doing the event there as well. So for sure it will be just interesting, and they are speaking real deal and big numbers, so it doesn't get boring around there.
Nico, Jake, will you join me for a pina colada at the Evolution closing party at Aki tonight at Valletta?
Definitely. That's why I flew all the way here.
Amazing, guys. Great to have you guys here live and in person. Always good to speak to you guys, and thank you so much for today. Thanks for everyone tuning in.
One more thing, because I had a interesting discussion with David Flynn as well during the conference as well, because he was literally riding his bike from Sweden down to Malta, not because he wasn't aware there are no flights available, because he just wanted to, raise awareness of mental health issues, etc. So, and the discussion I had with David was like, okay, it's not enough to just, as soon as someone just sets up a GoFundMe campaign, just putting some money in there. It's in the end, it's up to all of us just to sometimes just ring up a friend and having no agenda and just asking him how he is. So this is just something I just want to put out there. Just mental health is a thing which we can all cater for our friends. And then, what was the last time you just rang up a friend? And if this is time has passed more than 1 month, just give one of your friends a call and just ask him how he is. I'm pretty sure that's worth some time spent.
I think that's an excellent way to round things off today. And Nico, I think it's a good pitch to get some more calls inbound to yourself as well. Hopefully, a lot of people will contact you now, and you'll have a lot of new people to speak to here in the coming days. So everyone, feel free to contact Nico if you don't have any particularly close friends to speak to as well. But jokes aside, very important issue, of course. Let's all stay happy and healthy. Thank you so much, guys. Let's go have a pina colada. All right, let's do it.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Playzone. Thanks to...
They ain't coming close to me. Flow is on atomic, I'm starting fires through poetry. The heart's out, staying loyal, no falling out. And if you step onto the court, be ready, we balling out, yeah.